So, projector, do we just hit the on button and it's good to go? Or?
It is off. Hang on. Hold on. We're not on. Okay. Yeah, the projector's got to warm up. And then you should, if it's on the right. Yeah, you should show up in just a minute.
Okay.
That's good.
What's that?
Just snag a chair.
Okay, I'm going to see if this is really going or not.
Cool. Sweet. That's what we like to see.
And then I can switch it.
That's good. You be the muscle. Yep.
Probably pull out. And then I can switch the screen.
Ours just falls all the way down.
Oh, yeah.
If you hit 8, it'll switch to the pulse side. And then when we're ready, we'll push it to 6.
What's the matter, Richard?
That's how it'll toggle back.
Well, that's Shauna, I don't know. Shauna's been sick. Maybe you knew that. She's been sick, so.
I don't feel sick. I just
Oh. Yeah, maybe allergy or. Yeah.
Okay,
That's a good looking shirt from Bountiful Ridge.
Well, thanks.
It's
a couple of years
What was it, a couple of years ago?
It's looking good.
Hey, what was that fellow's name again? The door was locked, so I didn't go back in there.
Oh,
Are we going to have a meeting? Awesome.
So the
Galen, are you coming up here tonight, or are you sitting there? Okay. Want to come over there?
you don't have to have a straight.
You go like
I usually do, but I don't tonight. I took it home. I accidentally wore it home last week. I usually keep a solid black one, and I just wear it everything.
I totally meant to run blue and get one, but didn't happen. So. No, you're good. What's that?
Just so you know.
Yeah, it's all there. Yep.
So don't forget.
yeah.
Yes.
Little disclaimers.
If you ever need one and I'm not here, I'm taking the coat.
Yeah.
You're welcome to it. It's just black.
All right.
It goes with everything.
And she was wondering
That's
But I
where-
brought
that's
home.
how I knew to relax.
Last we had a field hearing on Thursday night. I just,
Yeah.
Mics are on, FYI, since we're recording.
Thank you. What happened to our third mic?
So number
I think
8.
there's just two.
We'll phone this one.
There's two.
Okay.
Okay.
And then who's the gentleman whose name you want?
It might show up. It says something. Oh, Beth's here, so we're good. Hey, Jane. Thank you. Hello, Beth.
Hey,
How are you?
I literally just came from Sandy City Hall, so
I know, they said you might be a little later. You and I could keep Mr. and Mrs. Christmas.
I know, right? An hour. I spoke for an hour.
Oh, so
Oh my goodness,
you
thanks.
to catch your breath.
Whew. Yeah, no kidding.
You made it though.
Yes, I did.
The camera hits it all right.
Is it really?
Oh, just so you know.
Well, it's supposed to be.
You just walked in.
That's right.
We're live.
Awesome.
Anyway,
That's so cool.
Nikki and Gary came and warned me so that I didn't
Oh,
do
yeah.
something embarrassing.
We're on there.
Oh,
We're
very
definitely on that.
It really picks up a lot.
Looks great.
I'm surprised.
Okay.
If you'd like, whatever you like. I like Tyson.
That's true. It's a good
Oh. Yeah, sorry. I didn't know that was a criteria.
Hello, everybody. everyone. This is the Bountiful City Council meeting, Tuesday, June 12th, 2018. We didn't have a work session. Is it not on? Is it not on? Okay. So you can hear me though, right? My mom said I'd always be heard. So anyway, so we didn't have. This is the regular session at 7 p.m. Thanks for all of you, the City Council, who are here. We do excuse John Mark Knight, who is out of town and unable to attend. And we appreciate those of you from the public being here, and those of the staff as well. So thank you all. We will begin our evening by having a pledge of allegiance by Mike Mayfield, and he's also the president, first counselor in the Bountiful Central Stake. Thank you. Yeah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mike, you are a very good scout. Thank you. And we're privileged to have President Curtis going to offer a word of prayer for us. Thank you, President.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we're thankful today to be able to meet here in the Bountiful City. We are thankful so much for the opportunity that we have to live in this wonderful choice community and in this wonderful country. We are so thankful for Thy blessings. Both voluntary, elected, and in as their jobs, and we pray that Thou wilt bless and protect them. Father, we're grateful for those who participate in this civic forum, and that they might, of the citizens, that they might be blessed with be able to communicate and listen and understand. We pray that Thou wilt bless us with a spirit of understanding and communication and cooperation and that decisions made will be made with wisdom and direction. And these things we pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, President. At this time, we'll have a public comment period. This is not the same as a public hearing, which we'll have later. This is just a 10-minute period at the beginning of our city council meetings where citizens can stand up and express themselves. You're concerned about something, Gary. So, and we would ask that you come up and more than 2 minutes. Tell us who you are and where you live, and that 10 minutes now opens. Anyone that wants to come forward.
I didn't put myself on the agenda on purpose, but I just want to briefly thank this wonderful community.
There we go.
Down the volume.
Thanks, Jane.
Yikes. I just want to thank all of you for the support that you give Joy Foundation and the projects that we work with in our festival. And I just want you to know how much the citizens and the children and the community appreciates this activity. And I particularly am so grateful for all of you. And thank you very much. And that's all.
Thank you, Jane. We appreciate you. For those who don't know, this is the Chalk Art Festival. This is Jane's baby. And I hope, how many of you went to the Chalk Art this year? Wasn't it impressive? I mean, it's really amazing. Thank you for all that you give to our community, Jane. We appreciate you. Any others who have just a public comment? Seeing none, then we'll proceed with our agenda. And we'll look for an approval of the minutes. If there aren't any corrections or additions, I'll look for a motion.
Move to approve those as printed, Mr. Mayor.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And Kendall, and we'll ask for a Bountiful City Youth Council report.
Great. I'd like to introduce Paige and Cameron. If you'll come up. This is Paige Mayfield and Cameron Hess, and they're two of our newest members on BCYC to give us our report tonight.
Hi, we're happy to be with you tonight. To start out, our first activity was the Getting to Know You activity. We play Getting to Know You games for the new members and for the returning members. And then we went to Pizza Pie Cafe, and it was really, really good.
There you go.
Thanks, Richard.
It's nice to hear.
It is nice to hear.
And our second activity that we did was the graffiti cleanup, and we went up to the B and to the tunnel up by the temple, and we just painted over all the graffiti up there, and it was really fun.
That's nice. Now, what's your name?
Cameron Hess.
Cameron?
Cameron, yeah.
Cameron.
And then this week we are helping with the car show, so.
All right.
Yes. You've covered a lot. You've covered a lot of bases. So you have you been on the council before?
No,
these
this is my
two. So this is new for both of them, Kendall and? Well, they're going to have fun.
Oh yeah, they've been on for about 2 weeks, and look how involved they already are.
Yeah.
They've already done these activities, and they're here reporting tonight, and these two are going to be awesome. So thank you so much.
Paige
for
and
being
Cameron,
here.
thank you.
Thanks.
We appreciate you. Anything else, Kendall, from your spot?
Not for me, thank you.
If not, we'll turn over to Chris Simonson.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah. Do you want to hear about the car show for about the next 10 minutes?
Did you?
We'd love it.
Do you really want to hear about the car show?
Sure.
Okay, Mayor, you're great. Just a little note about the car show that's coming up this Friday and Saturday. We are expecting a crowd of about 15,000 people. Over the 20 years we've been doing this, we've helped 8,000 children with new winter clothing that we got, that the child's parents can go to Walmart and actually pick the clothes they want off the shelf, which makes it the point where the child doesn't ever know that mom or grandma didn't buy it. This year we gave out scholarships. We've done that every year. One of our scholarship recipients, as she accepted her scholarship, started to cry. And we asked her, why? She says, I was one of the first to get your coats when I was 4 years old. And she said, it turned my life. It changed me, such a change. And I just didn't realize till about 2 years ago that Mom and Dad didn't buy that coat. And she said that gave me the desire to go on to college. And then her mother stepped in and said, this will be the first in our family line that has gone to college. And thank you for the opportunity of giving our child this scholarship. And I really want to thank Bountiful City, Brock, Gary, Sheriff, Jeff. We couldn't do this if it wasn't, Mayor, for the support of these great, great department heads. And Larry back here too, don't want to forget Larry and the power. The things that they have done to help us make this successful is wonderful. We're expecting 315 volunteers to show up and help us with it. I've got a phone call this afternoon. In fact, I get a phone call every afternoon from two men that are coming from California on motorcycles. And they call me each night and tell me how far they are and how close they are. And I said, one thing I want you to do is get here early enough Friday so you can get a motel and please take a shower before you come, because this is a classy event. And so we're expecting them to show up at any time. And so it's just, again, thank you. We thank the city, really. Mayor, they've been wonderful for what they've done to allow us to do this. And of course, the burnout is the favorite of the kids. The kids love the little boys, and after the burnout, the little boys will go out with little medicine bottles, and they'll scrape the rubber off the burnout track and put it in the bottle, and then they put a number on it, what year it was, and their mom tell me they go home and put it on a shelf. And they've collected, this one boy's collected the last 12 years of burnout rubber. He's got it on his shelf. So it's a great event. Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Anything else, Chris?
No, no. Next week, we're going to be replacing our Community Service Council next time we meet, so
Okay.
we'll take care of that then.
I think it's nice for the public to know that Chris Simonson began this Coats for Kids. How many years ago, Chris?
20.
20 years ago. Those 8,000 young people that have been taken care of are children. That's gone over 20 years. And the Rotary plays a big part and plays the part with you in making this happen. So we really appreciate you, Chris.
And we have to give the honor to Mayor Cushing, sitting right there.
Mm-hmm.
He was the one that gave us permission to do the first car show.
Well,
so
thank you, Mayor. Appreciate you. And Beth.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have anything to announce this time, but thank you so much.
You're welcome. Richard.
Nothing to report tonight. Thank you.
We will then proceed with the agenda, and we'll look for approval of the weekly expenditures of greater than $1,000 paid May 14th, 21st, 28th, and 29th, 2018. Is that right? 28th and 29th? Is that correct? Gary? Is that correct?
14th
Okay.
and 21st as well. Is that what you were asking?
Yes, I was just seeing that those were, the 29th was just one day after that.
It was because they spent so much on the 28th that it bled over.
That it bled over?
The printer couldn't work
So
very
are we
well.
good? Are we good with those numbers? So
Indeed.
we're okay?
I'd be happy to make a motion that we approve those as printed as well.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion passes. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh,
Sorry.
yes, please, Kendall.
When it was my turn, what I really meant to do was just ask a question, and I think that I heard that the power outage we had last week was due to a bird flying into a power line. Is that correct?
That's right. We had an eyewitness, kind of fortunately, who saw it happen, and that helped us from having to try and hunt down, what the source was. And so, yeah, that was an unfortunate bird accident.
Well, I wanted to thank the power department for their quick work on that. Alan, thank you. And those kind of unforeseen things that affect so many of us, but it's nice to know we can always count on your department. And so I was assuming that it was the AC load or something like that, but it was a bird. So anyway, I appreciated their work.
You're welcome. We tried to get Brock to come take care of the bird, but he was busy that day. So.
There you go.
Mr. Mayor, could I correct some mistake I made?
Please.
I neglected to include the April financial report in
Good.
the
Thank you.
approval. I'd like to include that now by motion.
Okay.
And I'll second.
Okay, and again, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I think that was my fault. I don't think I mentioned that one. Thank you, Richard. So we'll turn some time over now to Clint for item number 7.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a monumental event. I am usually the last guy to say things, so I don't know why I have the honor of going first. I attribute it to the mustache.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it real?
It is real.
Oh.
Yeah.
It is
my
real.
question.
Little shade there.
And I have to say, having a mustache is a different life, but one thing that's really strange is in order to have a mustache, they give you a mentor, and so I have this guy with a mustache sitting behind me to make sure that I do with it everything the way a man with a mustache would do it. So here I am.
Thanks for
I hope I do
over
okay.
it, Noah. Thank you.
All right. So on to the number 7. We are here for an interlocal agreement for dispatch services with Bountiful City, with Centerville City, Bountiful City and Centerville City. As the council may know, our dispatch center already provides fire and emergency medical services, dispatch services to the geographic area of Centerville City. And as the council is probably aware, we also provide police dispatch services for other cities in southern Davis County other than Bountiful City, Centerville City. And Centerville City approached us earlier this year and was looking at making their processes more efficient and consolidating some of their services. And we got together and put together this interlocal agreement. And what this does is allows for Bountiful City and Centerville City to work together for all dispatch services. So now it will be all of their dispatch needs to hopefully, or we will provide a more efficient law enforcement response than we have in the past. And that's due to just some of the communication matters that issues that there have been in the past, nothing on the part of prior dispatch services that were being provided. It just happens to be a more efficient system because of the way that we're set up, and there's already we're already doing fire and EMS services. So in the packet there was the interlocal agreement. It's got all the information. I'll just point out a few things there. It will provide that Bountiful City receives all of the 911 services revenue annually. There's also an annual fee. For the first year, it will be $40,000. That is subject to change per year, just depending on the way things shake out. And the agreement provides that we can just amend that administratively to deal with that. The term of the agreement will be for 5 years, and I think it's going to be a great thing. Any questions?
One question, Clint. So is that by volume when you determine the revenue for the year? Is that by volume of calls? And no?
I'll let Gary answer that.
No, historically and with our other agencies, it has just been, I think initially it was set up based on an allocation of calls, but now it's really just based on our cost expenditure, our own costs. The chief has tried really hard and to keep costs low for our partners. So even when we receive a cost of living increase, if we feel like we can continue to provide the service without passing those on, we don't. And so occasionally we'll give them I think the maximum increase we've given in 1 year was 3.5%, 4.5%, 3.5 one time. So, and it's worked out well.
Okay, perfect.
One thing I neglected to add is just that we will need to add 2 full-time dispatchers as employees. That is anticipated that there will be no additional cost to the city, that will be paid for through those annual fees and 911 collection calls fees that we receive. So with that, any other questions?
Just a quick question. Chief, you have the room, obviously, to add those 2 employees, so it's pretty straightforward.
That's correct. Our center, we always had and still look to have capacity beyond our immediate needs. The conversations with Centerville have been on and off at times over the years, and we always felt that when the time was right for them, they would approach us. And they've had a recent chief change not too long ago, and that's started the conversations up again. So this is good not only for Bountiful, but for all the cities surrounding Woods Cross, West Bountiful, North Salt Lake that we dispatch for. This is good for all of us.
As I said, it just provides for a more efficient response. You've got all the South Davis County law enforcement agencies being dispatched through Bountiful City. It's just more effective and more efficient. And then with the fire, they're not receiving it potentially from 2 different locations, and there's been some communication bumps along the way, delays, and this will eliminate that. So, and as we all know, when it comes to fire and emergency medical services and law enforcement, seconds matter. Yeah. So it'll be a good thing for our residents and for Centerville residents as well.
Thank you. Kendall, do you have a question?
Nope, I was just going to make a motion.
I'll look for a motion then.
I'd like to move that we approve Resolution 2018-07 regarding an interlocal agreement for dispatch services between Bountiful and Centerville cities.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion passes. Thank you, Clint. We will now turn some time over to Galen. Thank you, Galen.
I'll wait till the screen wakes up a little bit over there. But there we go. As you're all well aware, coming to this point, that we have gone through a number of meetings with staff and with public meetings in consideration of the budget, which starts, our budget year starts July 1st of every year and ends June 30th. And so you have been through a number of meetings. The public has had the opportunity to attend as well. And there's been a little bit of that along the way. The tentative budget, which we need to adopt by state law, was on May 8th, and so that document has been out for the public to take a look at ever since then. And because it's a budget is a plan that you start out with. There are necessarily adjustments that come along the way, and there are a few adjustments in it that will become part of the final. When we are submitting the budget document itself, we need to make a few adjustments to it to add a few things that the GFOA requires to get the certificate program that we do that is similar to the comprehensive annual financial report certification we get. So the look and feel of the budget is a little thicker by the time it's published than when it starts out. So just a little bit of history there. Tonight we are bringing this budget to you to give you, as well as the public that are here, a chance to get an overview of what is being proposed. And so I would like to go through a little bit of that presentation, and we can discuss a few things as we go. This is the budget process and timetable that we typically follow, and it's mandated by state law as to what we do during the period of time from mid-January or so until June in a regular year where we're adopting a certified tax rate. So we started in January 22nd, with looking at some preliminary budget projections, both revenue and expenses for city-wide perspectives. And then we started our department head budget preparation the day after January 23rd through March 1st. And you can read down through those dates. Through the March area, Gary Hill and myself reviewed the department requests and made adjustments from that point. The council committee hearings took place April 3rd through the 10th. Those were all public meetings, just like tonight. They were noticed and were opportunities for review and input. The tentative budget, as I mentioned, was adopted May 8th, and then we've had that period of time where it's been available until tonight, which is June 12th, excuse me. And the public hearings that are required to be take place on our budget are, because we do a transfer from our Light and Power Enterprise Fund to our general fund to help with operations. It's required in state law to hold a public hearing just for that purpose. We'll take care of that tonight. And then, because we are working through our current year budget, and because it was a plan, we had the opportunity to spend the funds that were approved, and occasionally there were situations that arose that caused us to go over budget by the time we hit the end of the fiscal year. So we're requesting amendments for certain departments for that reason. The tentative budget then would be proposed for adoption tonight at the conclusion of the public hearings. And then there would be an ordinance that would take care of that aspect, and it's a multi-functioning ordinance. It would have the adoption of the amendments to the current year we're in, the adoption of a tentative budget, which is what is out there now with the adjustments that we'll propose, and then with fees, charges, our long-term capital plan, and a few things of that nature that are required. So that will be proposed tonight. And then we'll go to a public hearing in August if you are of that mind to set that, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. All of the budget development is guided by the council's policy priorities that were set a number of years ago, and which are revisited every year as you go through your retreat, and we get to hear from you as the elected representatives of the city what the priorities need to be. And as a collaborative effort, we update and freshen these up each year. These are just kind of the bullet points that you're familiar with in the public, just for their purposes as well. Some key points to be aware of tonight from this budget. It is budgeted with both revenues and expenses being in balance, just like we do at home. We have to make sure we live within the means we have and have a source of revenue for everything we spend. The policy priorities are restated and addressed, and the budget is guided by that. We are proposing a property tax increase to take care of a few things that have happened that were unknown. Gary will go over that in a little bit. The budget does include a 3% cost of living adjustment due to a couple of years of not having that to bring us to a market situation, competitive, and employee merit increases for those that are eligible. There's a medical insurance increase of 10% for our renewal rate, and then a new street light fee that Alan Johnson may discuss a little later. Just to kind of take a look at where the money comes from, this is citywide perspective. This graph illustrates that just in category form. Most of our funds, because our enterprise funds are large and they generate fees from users using electricity or water or whatever it happens to be, 54% of our revenue from a citywide perspective is from that source. Then it goes down from there to taxes, pulling from reserves depending on the year of whether we need to fund capital projects, since we're primarily a pay-as-you-go city rather than being in debt, which is a hallmark of Bountiful for the number of years. Looking in more of a spreadsheet format of that graph, you can see numbers-wise where we came out. Now the budget that we're proposing here is 76 million and change that is being proposed. That's the revenue side, and the expense side matches that. So you can see each of the different funds of the city, they're presented under a number of different categories of the revenue sources. Looking about where that goes, on the other hand, most of it goes to fund operations and maintenance, so that could be everything from utility costs to maintenance agreement that we have, or fuel and that types of things, whatever it happens to be that keeps operations and maintenance of our equipment and supplies going. The next is our personnel, which we rely upon to deliver services, and that's everything from salaries and wages and employee benefits, retirement, and so forth that make up that number. Capital in this case is 24%, which we are having a number of capital items in each of the funds that are being taken care of, everything from purchasing vehicles to street work and major system upgrades. And then the balance is in smaller areas there. Looking at it again in a numbers format, in a spreadsheet format, that is how that shakes out. And that number at the bottom is the same number as the revenue in balance. Looking at it in a departmental perspective, the Light and Power Department is our largest enterprise fund, and so you would expect it would be the largest percentage-wise. The other departments, they're shown as far as by category. And then there's a sheet here that shows which of our departments are in which category there, and their percentages that were just in that former graph.
Galen, will you back it up one slide, please?
Mm-hmm.
So I can see that again.
The graph, this one?
Yes,
mm-hmm.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
You bet. This is a summary of the budget numbers we just looked at, so you can see it from a different aspect with a little bit more clarity on each of the revenue sources there, rather than the combined categories, to make it a little bit more user-friendly in a graph. And then the other side of that being the expense, which is again in balance, and by different categories of our departments or funds. One thing I'd like to do before going into this perspective as part of the budget is our RAP tax fund. And so we get, some of our revenues are from the Recreation, Arts, and Parks levy that goes along with every time you purchase something at a point of sale, you're paying a portion of that, a tenth of a percent, towards recreation, arts, and parks activities that the state allows those funds to be utilized for. We use a great amount of that for funding Creekside Park, development of that property. Another aspect of it, about 14%, that's 75% of the funds. 14% is used for other city types of trail projects or things of that nature that are recreation that the city is doing on its own. And then 11% we reserve for grant funding, that for entities that are cultural or arts perspectives or history or recreation in nature. So those entities have to be a nonprofit and have their primary business focus as being that. And so there is a separate grant process that goes through and looks at grant applications during each year. We've done this now, I believe this is our third cycle of doing these grant applications. And this year we had actually 5 entities that requested funding. We had 98 that, well, it was actually more than that. One of the entities that requested funding was later not able to be considered due to their business focus. But of the 4 that remained that did apply, we had $98,169 requested in funding, and we ultimately only had just under $60,000 to grant. And so we had to have the budget committee that is over this group, which is the Recreation and Arts Budget Committee, which is comprised of 3 of the elected officials, review those applications at a high level, and then due to their recommendation, there was a subcommittee formed that reviewed those requests in more detail and for assignment of funding from those based on the program requirements that are out there. And so what was recommended for funding due to the amount, the Bountiful Davis Arts Center, $38,159. We're recommending that full amount. The Bountiful Historical Foundation asked for $19,810, and we were recommending $6,371, so $6,371 there. The Centerpoint Legacy Theater asked for $30,000 for improvements to their downstage apron on the Barlow main stage, and we recommended no funding there, and I'll go over just a few points to there in just a second. And then the Joy Foundation that we've just talked about that does the chalk art and a number of other things in the city requested $10,000, and we granted that $10,000 as well, or recommended that, I should say, for a total of $54,730. Now to circle back to the Centerpoint Legacy Theater, the subcommittee, as the deliberations went, considered a number of things. Number one, the theater had received, because of interlocal agreement, our first allocations of RAP tax by interlocal agreement, where 90% of all of our funding went to development of the theater itself, the construction primarily. And so for an 8-year period, they received 90% of our funding, and then we retained 10%, which we did grants with. After that allocation was done and we got a renewal of the RAP tax, the prevailing thought was that we would try to focus on city projects that were under city entities that were requesting funds, so we could keep a bountiful focus on it. Also, last year, the Centerpoint was funded at a level of just over $42,000. That was a request for their sound system, that they had some needs there for upgrading their sound system. They had a grant from the state of Utah for part of it, and some other donors that contributed towards that, and Bountiful was one of those. In order to do that, we needed to pull back some money from our fund balance in order to even to accommodate that one, which we don't have the luxury of doing that this year, so the available funding wasn't there. And also, we occasionally, when we have these kind of requests and there's not enough money to distribute that, we have to consider other bases to allocate that. And in this case, we felt like it might be good to try to fund some other groups as well that had maybe not had as much funding and maybe had great need, or that might suffer if they didn't have the funding they would need to be able to carry on their programs that the community has valued so high. And it's a value proposition on all the fronts, because the theater itself provides great value as well, but so do some of the other entities, the Bountiful Davis Arts Center, the Joy Foundation, a number of them. So it's kind of one of those things that's a difficult process to wrap your head around and to try to make a recommendation that is fair and has some meat to it. So that's how the RAP tax grant process came about this year. So that's just kind of a highlight to that one. And if you have any questions, be sure to ask me on that. Now just go into some other areas of the city's budget. We typically take a look at some of the major taxes that we rely upon for the general services of the city. One of those is the sales tax, and the other is the gasoline-related taxes. This is a summary graphically and then also in tabular format of what the rate is, how it's broken down, and what percentage of it goes to which entity. The state of Utah gets quite a bit of the sales tax that you pay at the point of sale. Every local government city gets a 1% local option sales tax. Most cities in Utah have a sales tax adopted that way, and Bountiful is no exception there. The RAP tax is the other 10% that we talk about. And then there's a portion for the local option transportation that goes to fund roads and related things in our city, and that's a portion of the sales tax rate. Davis County gets a portion for their purposes, as well as UTA for mass transit and initiatives of that nature. The gasoline tax is broken down, as you can see there, at the 48 cents, 18.5 cents for the federal government, and 29.5 cents for the state government. And then there's a distribution formula that is for the what we call Class C road funds, that is the gasoline tax. And that 75% goes to the state and 25% on the cities and counties. And its distribution is based on, I think it's still road mileage, and there's another basis and it escapes me, but that's what?
Road type.
Road type, okay, that's right. So that's kind of an idea of where those taxes are split and who benefits from those, to give you an idea there. Looking at our power fund and how we compare with Rocky Mountain's rates, these are the rates that are proposed that we have versus what Rocky Mountain's current rates are. There is a little bit of finessing that needs to go into fitting their rates to ours because they have a little bit different rate base than we do. Fortunately, Alan Johnson and Jay Christensen assisted me with this by providing these numbers to try to mesh up best as we could. So that's kind of a idea there for comparison's sake of where we are standing versus Rocky Mountain Power. Now, just to kind of summarize where the major pieces of the budget go for the current year that we're proposing, it is almost $35 million for the power department and for all that they're doing. That's operations and capital. And for the water department, just under $6 million, $5.9 million. Our streets, all the operations, all the paving and so forth that goes into that, $5 million. Sanitation and landfill, two separate funds but combined for reporting purposes, $3.4 million. Police services, our biggest general fund department, combined $8.2 million. Fire protection at $2 million. Fire protection being a separate entity which we are partnered with through, they get a separate tax levy, but they are also funded by member city contributions, which we're a part of that. And so we get fire service and paramedic services through that. Stormwater, $1.6 million. And our cemetery, just under $600,000 for all that's done there. Now, there's a few things that need to take place tonight that I referenced as I began my remarks, and that would be, first off, a public hearing for the transfer that is made every year from the power fund to the general fund, and then there would be a public hearing separate from that one once that one's closed that would cover the amendments that we're proposing. And you should have on your desk a really large spreadsheet that, even though it's big, it still has small numbers on it. I should give you a magnifying glass with it too, but I neglected to do that. But the changes, there are a couple of additions since you got it in your packet, and I've put the changed areas with a double red asterisk to the right by the description of what the amendment is for. There were a couple that came in after the fact, and so those are additions to that. But that will become part of the ordinance that you will adopt or consider for adoption. And that ordinance will be 2018-03, and that'll include all the components that I discussed earlier. Do you have any questions before we go to a public hearing? just turn that to you, Mayor.
Thank you. With that, we will open a public hearing on that first portion that we talked about.
Would you like me to go over just a little bit of an overview on this and then open it? Would you?
Please.
Okay, maybe I could just take it from that perspective. We could do it either direction. The transfer that we do is to help, it's a number of different things that it covers. It covers the services that are provided for the enterprise funds. If we didn't provide those services, they would need to contract for somebody to do payroll for them, to do their financial statements, to do their legal and insurance work and those types of things. And so the funding that comes back to us is an allocable share of the costs that we are trying to measure in delivering those services to the enterprise funds. And so they're being charged internally for something that would be an external charge in reality in a private business. This is a perspective of looking at that from a numbers view, and this is a little bit of a busy schedule, but it shows the breakdown of what is billed to each of those enterprise funds and to the RDA for employee time. So that is people putting in the time that they do and doing those functions I just mentioned, and then any materials or operating or maintenance costs that may be allocable to that effort. And then that summation there is then allocated to each of those entities. We don't allocate all the costs that could be allocated just because we are trying to be responsible to make sure those funds aren't hurt by the amount of money they're charged. There could be additional costs allocated, but because of the financial situation of each of the funds with that, the total that is billed out to those departments is just under $100 million each budget year. So that's kind of an idea there what that looks like. Just looking at that transfer now from the light and power to the general fund, based on the current budget that's before you, the percentage of the transfer amount that's transferred just from the power fund is it's 2.49 million that is transferred, and based on their budget, that's 7.8% of their budgeted expenditures. So that gives a perspective of what percentage that they're transferring. Now again, this is over and above that transfer, the transfers I was just talking about. This is an operating transfer that is made every year that has helped to fund the general fund. It helps to fund services to all entities, whether they pay for services otherwise or not through taxes. This is a history of how much has been transferred over the years, and those dollar figures are in millions. So, for instance, that last one there, it's $2,490,000, but it's 10% of metered sales. Now, earlier, back in the fiscal year 2000, it was actually 15% of metered sales. It dropped slowly to 12, and then down to 10 eventually, and it's been at 10% for a number of years, as you can see there. That has been utilized as an operating revenue source for the general fund. This is essentially what it pays for, and why it is a proposed transfer and revenue source. It's 10% of metered sales. It funds essential services for all that are in our community, all that are residents, anybody that is here that receives services. It allows some non-property taxpayers to actually receive services to help fund them by, since they're paying for power, if we transfer some of that money back, that actually helps us to fund police calls, fire calls, and things of that nature, plowing the streets in front of these entities. So, I mean, it could be churches, it could be nonprofit organizations, other governmental entities that don't pay a property tax, but yet we still deliver services to them. And so this is a way to retain a revenue source to help pay for the costs of delivering the services that we must provide. It helps keep our property taxes low. If we didn't have this transfer, it would essentially double what our property tax rate is in a given year. And again, it represents 7.8% of the total budgeted expenditures of the Light and Power Fund. And another way of looking at it is considering it is a dividend back. It's something that is coming back to the taxpayers for their investment in the fund. And so it's just another way to look at it, a transfer that's had a long history. Mayor, just turn it over to you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Galen. So with that, we will open this up to a public hearing, and this public hearing is on that information just received on the enterprise fund transfer. And we'd appreciate it if you would come to the podium and tell us who you are and where you live, and we would be happy to hear from you.
I think most of you know me. My name is Lowell Leishman. I've been associated with most of you for quite a while. And I just want you to be aware that you have a very, very wonderful asset in the Centerpoint Theater. The Centerpoint Theater board consists of equal number of Bountiful people as well as Centerville Theater. Centerville. I think there seems to be a feeling in Bountiful that because it's located in Centerville, that Bountiful does not have any responsibility for helping with that theater. The RAP tax, as stated, started because the people who have been in this theater went out door to door to get the RAP tax passed so that those funds would be available for the city of Centerville and the city of Bountiful to be able to fund the theater. Now it's true the bond has been paid off, but if we do not provide the funds to continue to keep that theater operational and up-to-date fit, we're going to lose something that is very valuable to this community. I think I would like to request that you consider a portion of the money that you have allocated to the arts and people to be allocated to Bountiful for the Centerpoint Theater to help them continue to maintain that building, to maintain it operational and provide the great, great resource for art for the people in Centerville and Bountiful. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Lowell. Thanks, Lowell. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Shelley Davies, and I am the Director of Development at Centerpoint Legacy Theater. I was also the chairman of the committee that supported and championed the RAP tax. And I went to so many book clubs and so many homes and met with people championing that RAP tax. And we were excited when it was passed. And so we feel very blessed that it did pass to benefit both cities, and we feel like we're sister cities. And so we would also like to champion that thought process, that we are sister cities, and we're very, very grateful to Bountiful and for all that they have done. So thank you. I would like to also suggest that there be some funding for Centerpoint Legacy Theater. I don't know how aware all of you are of the impact that Centerpoint has made in the community, but I would like to just share some facts with you. We merged, it was Rogers Memorial Theater, and we merged with Bountiful Community Theater to create Centerpoint Legacy Theater. And I remember Mayor Joe saying thank you for doing that. Now I don't have to worry about Bountiful Community Theater anymore. I was in a meeting when he said that. We all had to laugh a little bit. Over at Centerpoint, we're not just about theater. We have an academy there, and I wish I could tell you the number of children that are from Bountiful. I don't have that number, but we're over 550 children now from the community that are engaged in that wonderful confidence-building activity. And it has become a home for so many of the children in the community. 21% of our season ticket holders are from the city of Bountiful. And the other number that is as big as that ties is outside of Davis County. So inside of Davis County, 21% are from Bountiful. So we really are a sister organization. We operate on a lot of volunteer manpower. We had over 96,000 hours of volunteer hours to help us operate over there. And that comes from cities all over the county, but a lot of those hours come from Bountiful. When this wonderful gentleman, it was this gentleman over here, talked about value proportion. That's something I think a very interesting aspect. I agree that all of the arts organizations should be funded. But last year at Centerpoint Theater, we had 105,848 individual visits. And so when you compare that with the other arts organizations that you're talking about, we definitely have the largest proportion of visits. So I think that's something you need to take into consideration. Over the last year, we have a group that goes to elementary schools to make visits to introduce them to the arts. And so in the last school year, we went to 24 different elementary schools throughout Davis County. Many of those were in Bountiful City, and we introduced the arts to over 9,000 students in elementary schools. We have a fairy tale festival, and we will be holding our 6th annual fairy tale festival, where we have children come from the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and we also have donations for Locks of Love. And last year we had over 6,000 visitors to that. We have a friend-to-friend program, and we have 75 students. We don't call them special needs or handicap. We call them students with remarkabilities. And that's a free program that Centerpoint offers. And they come once a week, and then we put on 2 productions. And you're invited to come and see it, June 22nd and 23rd. One of the mothers that has a student, she calls it a place of just pure liquid love. And so that's another service that we offer to the community that is absolutely wonderful. I think what Centerpoint has given to this community is something that you really can't measure. And I just want to finish with a quotation. So much of the toxicity of this world comes from a collective draining of empathy. We don't understand each other, and we don't want to. But theater invites us, no forces us to empathize. Bill English of the San Francisco Playhouse says, theater is like a gym for empathy. It's where we can go to build up the muscles of compassion, to practice listening and understanding and engaging with people that are not like ourselves. We practice sitting down, paying attention, and learning from other people's actions. We practice caring. Kids need this kind of practice even more than adults do. This is going to be their planet, and they've got more time to apply that empathy and make a difference. If you take a child to the theater, not only will they practice empathy, they might laugh uproariously, or come home singing about history, or open up about what happened at school today, or spend dinner discussing music, or learn how to handle conflict, or start becoming a future patron of the arts. I would like to suggest that the footprint that Centerpoint Legacy leaves on this community is huge and needs to be recognized and hopefully funded by a portion of the Bountiful RAP tax. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you, Shelley.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Dale Bohm. Now, I'm from Salt Lake City, and I'll get to that in just one second. But I was just making sure, this part of the hearing, I'm not sure if this is where we were supposed to discuss the RAP tax, but I would like your permission if you would consider the comments that have been made prior that they will be considered as if they were in the proper hearing. Can I have that agreement? All right, thank you. It's like making sure I understand. Once again, I'm speaking for Centerpoint Theater. But let me go down a little bit different of an avenue than has been said already. Talking about the benefit that is the community, I don't think anyone here disagrees that it's a benefit to the community. It is becoming, however, more and more recognized both locally and nationally. We have Centerpoint, and I say we, I've played a little part in doing some shows there, voluntary, and I consider myself to be a part of the family. I've never drawn a paycheck. I have gotten some free tickets in exchange for doing shows, and that's always fun. But there have been recently national recognition in the form of awards from entities such as Broadway World, and there have been interests from Broadway touring shows in the costumes that have been produced there. It is gaining recognition. I said, I'm from Salt Lake City, and the reason you should listen to me on this is I'm not from Centerville, and I'm not from Bountiful, but Bountiful is where I eat. And the more people that you draw from Salt Lake City, this is where they fuel their cars. This is where they eat before the theater. This is where they eat after the theater. The more you invest in Centerpoint, and excuse me, I'm an attorney, so I'm a little bloodthirsty in this way, the more that you invest in this, the more you get back. So looking at this and saying, we've given enough, we had a budget and we gave so much of the budget to this in the past, and so we don't have to anymore. The more you raise the budget, the ability of Centerpoint to produce the quality arts programs that they produce, the more you invest, the more you get back, because they draw audiences from south of your city, and this is where they eat. This is where they fuel their cars. This is where they spend their money. They eat at the Sizzler right off the side of the road there. They fuel their vehicles here. Every bit that you give, the city of Bountiful gets back because you're the doorway to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others that would like to speak in terms of I think we covered the wrap tax rather than the transfer. Is there a way to, should we do anything about that?
No, so what I would recommend is if there's anyone who would like to specifically address the transfer, they should come up now. Otherwise, close the public hearing. The Galen will present the rest of the budget, and then if anybody else would like to speak on anything else related to the budget, including
that's perfect.
Including any additional comments on the wrap tax, they could do that then.
Okay, that's perfect. Galen.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, you'll need to close the public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
On the
with that, we will close the public hearing on the transfer of funds. Thank you.
I think you're going to take this, Gary. Do you want me to bring these in?
Yes, please. The next portion of this discussion is we wanted to go into some detail about the reasons why we are discussing tonight a property tax increase that's actually been discussed in prior meetings with the City Council. And it begins with a discussion of recent legislative attitudes and actions that cities are unfortunately all too familiar with the last several years, and this year in particular. We have seen a noted increase in legislative overreach, a lack of trust in local government officials, and willingness to take away decision-making ability from and funding from local governments. This is just a quick snapshot of some of those, Council, that passed just this year or were considered just this year. Senate Bill 189, which basically preempted local land use and forces cities to accept small wireless facilities in our right-of-way, and took away our ability to negotiate and set fees. Senate Bill 167, which actually gives food trucks in some circumstances greater rights than brick and mortar buildings. We can no longer, for example, require a food truck to demonstrate as a part of its application where it sits on a location, or even that they have permission of the owner to be there. The Inland Port Authority, which we're familiar with in Salt Lake, passed this year. That continues a precedent of preempting local control, creating a zoning area that is exempt from all local zoning decisions. So next, if there was an area created, it would be the board and not the city that would have the ability to decide densities and heights. It takes 100% of the RDA revenue away from Salt Lake City, and there's minimal local representation. I think Salt Lake City has one person on that board. We were told years ago when MIDA passed that was the only time that was ever going to happen, and now we have this state inland port authority, and it's a concerning trend that ignores the needs of local residents. HB 265 would have preempted local agreements for power districts, power cities with other utility districts. It did not pass after a lot of effort. Senate Bill 120, local government fees and taxes prohibits a city from imposing a transportation or a street fee, which many cities have, on counties. HB 3061, preempt local land use regarding billboards. HB 174, this was the bill that would have created a legislative oversight committee that would have had the power to review all local laws, that did not pass. There's a picture of Beth, Holbrook, who's the president, not only on our city council, but is the current president of the Utah League of Cities and Towns, testifying at the legislature, actually looking at the sponsor of the bill after she testified. And
I promise I didn't do that fist on purpose. I got a lot of comments on that.
natural reaction.
I was like,
I didn't see that. That's really
good.
So essentially, it was
There
a
you go.
legislative committee that could have overturned any local laws. And then finally, and the reason we started this discussion about property tax with the City Council is Senate Bill 235, which is a bill relative to homeless shelter funding. The leadership in the House pushed a bill that takes away a portion of our 1% local option sales tax. It takes that from all cities and gives it to cities that have homeless shelters to pay for costs related to public safety in those communities. Now, rather than taking state funds for a statewide problem, what they said was, well, cities, you need to share the burden. I think sometimes it said you need to share the pain. And so they've taken away annually from us, it will be $75,000 this first year, plus whatever sales tax growth is into the future. A quote from Saratoga Springs relative to this, and I think our council echoes this statement, that essentially we don't fault the cities that are impacted by the homeless, nor do we turn our noses at the plight of the homeless, but we are frustrated by the legislature and its continual willingness to preempt local decision making. So the problem is that $75,000 comes directly out of our general fund and directly impacts our general fund services. This was not anticipated in our budget preparations this year, and we have a lot of general fund needs in this city. Our street needs are well known. Last year we did a rather intensive study that mirrored our own department study of our road conditions. The good news is that according to standards, Bountiful is doing pretty well. But if we want to do better, we're going to have more revenue for streets. So having a portion taken away provides us no help whatsoever. Parks, we've built a beautiful new park in Creekside Park. We're about to build a downtown plaza. We're very proud of our parks in the city, and we're grateful to prior leaders that saw the need to build parks, and it's something that I think we're all very proud of in the community. Parks create visitation and provide revenue for us with the visitation, and great places for our residents to be. So those are good things, but in order to maintain the level of service, we have to maintain our revenues in the general fund. And then finally, as we thought about the impacts that we would have to our general fund, we talked about our police department. And I'm going to have Chief Ross come up and talk a little bit more about that. But we have been watching a trend statewide for a number of years that has been very difficult for us. There, nationwide, really, there is a shortage of police officers and fewer people joining the police services. This shortage of police officers in the state leads to great competition between agencies for police officers. And it creates competition in wages. Now, last year we did a market study and we're very competitive in our wages in Bountiful, fortunately. But it creates competition with regards to retirement. We belong to the Utah retirement systems. And a few years ago they changed retirement so that we have newer officers that are being hired receive a lower benefit than older officers. That creates inequity, and some cities are taking advantage of that by offering money in 401k for those Tier 2 employees. It creates difficulty with staffing levels. It is very difficult to maintain full staffing. That increases overtime demands and especially impacts the ability of our officers to perform their jobs as we would like to, and for us to have coverage like we'd like to. We have 36 sworn officers in Bountiful. Now that 36 sworn officers includes 4 officers in administration, the chief, deputy chief, 2 lieutenants who are not in patrol. And I'll have Tom come up now and talk about the trends that we've been seeing. Really, we've been talking about it since I've been here, so 5 years, and have really waited to see if these trends were sustainable with regards to staffing, if there was just a bump, or if we were going to have problems. And this is the data. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Gary. Mayor, members of the council, I just want to, first of all, before we talk about this, publicly say how much I appreciate the thoughtful leadership that you display in working through a lot of these difficult situations. I realize the difficulty in asking for a tax increase. This request is something that I and the employees at the police department do not take lightly. And I want you to know, and I want the residents of our community to know, that we have made changes over the course of really the last 4 to 5 years. Ever since 2014 is when we started experiencing the outward attacks on law enforcement. We started seeing the difficulties in hiring, and we started seeing officers leave the profession at levels we've never seen before. And we have tried to do everything we can within the budgets we have, the organization itself, the structure, the environment we create, to try to make this a place that our officers and all of our employees in the police department want to be and work. And I want you to know that the forces that are driving this are market forces that are outside of our control. So we are at a point where we are now asking for assistance from our citizens. Over the course of that, the 5 years, well, first I want to talk a little bit about when I first came here. I just passed my 30-year mark in March, back in '88. And actually just before that, as I started as a reserve officer for 3 positions that were open. We had the cafeteria at Bountiful High filled with nearly 500 applicants. That was the environment I came into. And it was a great environment it was hard to get hired. Once you got hired, that was a great environment to be in. Our most recent test, we had 33 applicants. More than half didn't even make it through the process of the application, from either their background, criminal histories, they didn't meet minimum qualifications. And by the time we went through a fitness test and interviews and a psych test and other background tests that we do, we had 1 candidate. We had 4 positions to fill. So we immediately turned around and started another process. Now, to give you a little insight, those 4 positions aren't just officers leaving our department. I don't want people to feel that that is what's driving it. We had an officer retire after 20 plus years, sergeant. We had an officer that was let go for all the right reasons. We had an officer that was activated for the military. And we had an officer that left for the very reason that Gary spoke about, for the Tier 2 benefit that another agency was paying that was an increase. So when you look at our staffing, at this chart that we have up here, you can see that in 2014 is really when the most significant hits started happening, where we're dropping down 3 and ultimately 4 bodies. 4 bodies is 25% of our patrol division officers. When you think about it in that context, you can imagine how difficult it is to staff and be able to operate the services that we provide. We handled over 26,000 incidents in our city last year. We made over 1,100 arrests. This is a busy city. We're close to Salt Lake County. We're impacted by what happens out in that area. And most of the criminal element that comes in from Salt Lake County. In trying to accommodate this, because as we've worked through this, we were hoping that these were shorter term trends, that things would start turning around. And we've been focused on that from the beginning. There have been cities doing tax increases for well over 3 years. Many, including in Davis County. We are not the first to the trough. I will almost argue we're one of the last coming to the trough. And again, that's important to us because we're trying to be responsible. And we're not coming and standing in front of you just because it makes it easier. We're standing in front of you because we are at a point where we either reduce service levels in order to maintain, or we risk losing people. When we did the study, we were competitive in our wage, and that was very helpful to see. But the number 2 reason that our officers identified as would drive them to leave is the overtime demands that we were putting on them to work. You can't have, the supervisors are asking people to work overtime every single day. We're trying to get overtime filled. That's not sustainable. When I came in, I loved overtime. It might explain a lot of my intricacies, I guess, but I loved overtime. I came to Bountiful partly because of that. That's not so much what people desire. So the last time we were fully staffed was 2015. In the past 6 years, only 20% of the time have we been fully staffed. That tells you that that trend is not sustainable. To try to accommodate some of those changes, obviously we polled our problem-oriented policing unit. We have 2 officers that serve in that, a very significant ability to address ongoing problems in our community. It was formed for that very reason. We shuttered for 2 months in 2018 so far this year, 5 months in 2017, and 1 month in 2016. We closed them down, put them in patrol. In 2018, for 3 months, we pulled a detective out of our detective division to fill patrol shifts. My administrators are working patrol shifts to try to fill that vacancy. So, and they're busy with everything else that we need to do to manage a police department. And as you see, I mean, Salt Lake's been the most advertised. They were looking to add, initially it was 50 officers. They're still trying to. Highway Patrol's trying to add roughly 50 to 75. Unified's looking at a similar number. We are competing against all these agencies to attract our talent. The good news is we have very talented employees. We've been fortunate. The bad news is that as we turn over, we're constantly training and learning the Bountiful culture and the Bountiful way of doing business, which our residents appreciate and love. And I hear that all the time. There is a difference. And that's something that from a profession and as a goal of our organization, we take very seriously, and I think our residents appreciate that. Another area to look at that I think is very telling is what is our history? Bountiful has a history, and I'm proud to say this, even though I'm sure I would have some employees that might feel otherwise, that we've learned how to do more with less, and we've been doing it all along. When you look at the population of our city and the number of officers per that population, we have the lowest staffing levels of any city in the county. And yet when you look at our productivity from the activities that we generate, we are high. That tells me that we're doing a lot of the right things and a lot of good things with our people. And our people are out there trying to do the right things for the citizens that they serve. I will never say that, depending on the staffing levels of different organizations, what their needs are. I'm not one to stand and be critical of that. I don't know what they need. But nobody can look at that and say that we are not being conservative and that we are not doing a lot with less. And I think that's important. And as we considered and we talked about this process, and Gary and I have had numerous conversations over the past couple of years, not saying we need a tax increase, not even saying we have to have officers now, but it was, what are our target points? What are we looking at? What are the impacts we're having? How do we get through this period of time? I would not be here today, standing in front of you, or in any future discussion, if I couldn't look every citizen in the face, in the eye, from the elderly retiree on a fixed income to the individual with the biggest homes that has the biggest property tax, and say, we must do this. It is the right thing to do to maintain a level of public safety. Our officers must have backup. When they go on certain types of calls, we can't just send one. And I, as the chief, must balance with their families and with their spouses, protecting them while we handle any call that comes in at any given time throughout this city. And that's a tough balance. I would challenge anybody to lay their heads down at night and have to have that weigh on, are we doing the right things? So we're at a point where I feel like this is the right thing to do. And I hope that our residents will, as they understand it and as they see the need and understand what we have done, that they will feel the same way. And that with that, if there's any specific questions that any of you have, I'd be happy to answer them and respond to them.
Just as the chair of the Law Enforcement Budget Committee, I just want to thank you, because sitting in on that meeting, and I'm sure Chris and Beth would agree, looking through the different line items, you do a lot with a little, and so I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And we couldn't do it without the support of you as elected officials, without the support of our city administrators and leaders. And this is a great community to work in. I tell our officers and employees all the time, part of another role that I'm in, I interact with a lot of other agencies in this state. And it breaks my heart to think of places where officers might be engaged in trying to take some type of enforcement and be attacked by the very residents that live in the area. Utah's fortunate that we don't have many of those, but we do have some of those areas. That would never happen in Bountiful. I know that. Our residents would be standing side by side with us in defending our city. That's an important distinction, and I want our officers and our employees to know that that's the value and that's the benefit of being here. We have to do certain things to make sure we're competitive, but more importantly, that relationship that exists in that between the citizens, the city, the elected officials, and the employees over in that building make it the right place to be. And when you serve 30 years, and who knows how long that period goes, when I leave here someday, it's going to be with very fond feelings and a very fond appreciation. So, thank you.
I did just want to add to that really quickly. Chief Ross is being rather modest. He is highly, highly respected throughout the state for his representation in his various roles in law enforcement, and we are very fortunate to have him here representing our own city. And I wanted to echo and add on to that I just came from a city council meeting, actually another one, and I attend multiple city council meetings, and that is actually one of the top discussions, is this very situation. So I wanted to thank you for articulating that, and thank you for everything that you have done and are doing for our city.
Thank you.
Chief, I'd just like to make a comment if I could, Mayor.
Sure.
I feel strongly that the role of government is first public safety. We have to be safe in our homes. We have to be safe on the street. Our grandchildren have to be safe playing. And then when accidents happen, we need a response from the fire department and our paramedics. And to me, those are the two highest priorities I think a city should have. I can tolerate a pothole here and there, but I can't tolerate a police officer not having the needs he needs and the protection he needs so that he can go home at night to his family. So priority one of mine is public safety, strong police force, and a strong fire department. And I thank you, and I thank Chief Bassett for doing what you do. You're great men. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Echoed by the rest of us, I'm sure.
For sure. Mayor, we'd like to then give some time to Tyson to talk about what the property tax looks like and what the impact would be on our residents, if you don't mind.
I can tell you what it looks like already. It's always ugly. Just saying.
Well, Mayor and members of the City Council, it's great to present on this. I apologize for following up, Chief, on this. I feel like I should just run up and give him a big hug right now. And now I'm talking about property taxes. I'll meet you after, Chief. I'll meet you after.
That's awesome.
So just wanted to give kind of a high-level overview of property tax in general in Bountiful, and then how this potential property tax increase will affect an average household. So first off, as of right now, Bountiful has the second lowest tax rate in Davis County. So we're extremely low from a city standpoint in our tax rate. And we're the third lowest combined tax rate in Davis County. So obviously there are multiple taxing entities that make up your property tax bill. We are just one portion of that tax bill. And with the combined tax rate, we're still the third lowest rate in Davis County. So we've been very historically low in our property taxes. So
Tyson,
please.
Can I just add that those two cities that are below us, they're very small in population cities. And even the one above, those are very small towns actually than cities.
Thank you for the comment.
Technically, they are still cities.
Oh, they're still cities. She knows.
Correct. Yeah. So what we're looking at for a proposed property tax increase is about $300,000. So we're looking at replacing that $75,000 that Gary spoke about, where the state of Utah is requiring that we contribute $75,000 of our sales tax to help with the homeless shelters. And then we're looking to add 2 additional police officers. And with that, we're not just talking benefits and salaries, we're talking equipment as well. So in order to do that, we're looking at a $300,000 increase in property tax. And so that's the basis of what we're looking at this year for a tax increase. So I just wanted to kind of give everyone an idea of how our property tax bill is being used. So for the 2017 property tax levy, you can see that 62% of the property taxes were used by the school district, Davis School District. The Davis County represented 21% of our property tax use. We were 7% of the property taxes. So of the $100 that you paid in your property tax, $7 went to Bountiful City. The rest was used by all of these other entities. So we have water and sewer districts that are part of the tax levy. We have the fire district that has its own levy. We have the recreation district that has its own levy. And then the mosquito abatement district also has its own levy. So all of these make up the 100% of our property tax bill. And that's how they were used in our 2017 property tax levy. So as we're looking at a $300,000 property tax increase, what does that look like for an average resident? So when we're discussing this, we're using a figure of $340,000 as an average home value. Now, the home values have obviously gone up recently. The county's reporting that Bountiful's residents went up by 8.7% between the 2017 levy and what will be the 2018 levy. So home values are increasing dramatically, and so we're using a $340,000 figure because that's what the county is telling us is going to be the average home value in Bountiful. So Bountiful's proposed property tax increase on a $340,000 home would be $19.50 annually. So that would increase your property taxes $19.50, so $1.63 per month. So this we're calculating based off of the proposed tax rates that are on the state's website and supplied by the county. So overall, as I mentioned before, there are multiple entities who are taxing us, and if we look at the overall rate, if we do this property tax increase, it will be an increase of 1.3% for the overall rate, assuming that none of the other taxing entities also are increasing their property tax rate. And obviously we have no idea who's going to be increasing their rates and who won't, so we have to assume that things are static. So if we were to just look at Bountiful's rate alone, from what we charged in the fiscal 17 levy, or the calendar 17 levy, to what will be the calendar 18 levy, the rate would increase by 13.48%. Now, again, that's just our portion of it. If we look at the property tax levy as a whole, that is the increase is only 1.3%. So again, on a $340,000 home, the increase, without the increase, it would be charged a property tax bill of $145.93 for the city's portion of the levy, and with that increase, it would go up to $164.47. So again, we're looking at that around that $19.50 per year increase. If we were to proceed with that property tax increase, we'd, on average, down here at the bottom, we'd be, the average tax bill on a $340,000 home for the city would be $262. Ours, with this increase, would be that $165 that I mentioned. So again, we'd still be extremely low in our property tax rate as a city. So that we obviously want to make sure that we're taking care of the police department and we're recovering the sales tax that will be lost. But as managers of the city and as a city council, we want to be more proactive in evaluating the needs of the city, and in doing so, we have to evaluate our revenue sources. So the property taxes are a very important revenue source for the general fund of the city, and so this is something that we want to do more regularly. The last time we did a property tax increase was in 2001. So when we're looking at an 18-year span between increasing property taxes, we probably need to look at it more regularly. And I just wanted to point out two quick graphs just to help illustrate that point. So if we look clear back in the year 1999 at our property taxes, we were at about $1.6 million in property tax revenue at that point. If we follow that line, the blue line up top, to today, we're at about 2.4 million in property taxes is what we're collecting. Now, if we look at that with inflation and we calculate inflation on that, we're actually looking at going from the 1.6 million back in 1999 down to around 1.5 million in today's dollars. So our buying power of that property tax has decreased substantially. So again, we haven't visited the property tax increase in a long time, and inflation does play a big factor in that. The other aspect of this is as a city, we've tried to be a pay-as-you-go entity. We've tried to use our reserves, build up reserves, and then use those reserves rather than going out and getting bonds and paying interest to outside entities. So we've tried to be a pay-as-you-go city. And with the policy of being a pay-as-you-go city, you're going to have years where your reserves increase, and then you're going to have years where you use your reserves. So it's just a natural ebb and flow of a pay and go type entity. So I've graphed here the capital projects fund, the fund balance. So basically our reserves for the capital projects fund since fiscal year 2007 up through 2017, our last audited year. And you can see that we built up our reserves, and then in 2012, fiscal 2012, we finished building our power plant, which required a great deal of money. And we were able to use 10 million of our reserves to defray what we would have had to increase our bond amount for. So we've been able to save interest because of that. So, but it depleted our reserves to this point, and here we are continuing this flat line up until our last audited year in fiscal 2017. So something that we've been looking at and wanting to start that increase again, start building the reserves again for that time when we need to do a big project. So with the idea of having our policy being pay as you go, we need to stop this flat line and start to increase our reserves again, so that when the big projects come, we can pay for them. So just wanted to quickly highlight that and bring up the point that we, as managers, and the City Council has also expressed that they would like to pursue looking at regular property tax increases. And this doesn't mean that we'll do it annually, but it's something that we want to look at more diligently and be more proactive with, rather than waiting 18 years in between and having the problem of inflation and not keeping up with our revenue sources. So just something to be aware of, that we want to visit this more regularly. So just quickly in summary, the proposed property tax increase we're looking at for this upcoming budget is $300,000. Again, for the $75,000 to replace the sales tax, and the $225,000 for 2 additional police officers. The increase for an overall tax rate would be 1.3%. If you're just looking at the Bountiful's individual rate, 13.48. But again, this translates down to $19.50 on an annual basis. And then just again, we want to look at property tax rates on a regular basis. And if we feel that it's warranted, if we have a poor sales tax year or something like that, like we had during the recession, maybe we visit it sooner than later. But something we want to visit on a more frequent basis. And that's all I have for my portion of the presentation, unless there are questions.
Okay, Mayor and members of the council, this is the section where we need to talk about the amendments that we need to our current year, and then to close out the discussions we've had thus far of what the proposed budget includes, and just kind of revisit that and some of the things that will lead to action on your part after the public hearing. Just to give a little bit of a summary of the amendments that are requested prior to the opening the public hearing, if I may. On your table, and as it'll be part of the ordinance, is that larger sheet that has all the details of each of the amendments that go to these departments. The general fund, you'll see there we have several of the departments that are requesting revisions, and those are just in summary format. Human Resources, for instance, $6,000. Police has $57,000. Parks, $36,000, and so forth. In the capital fund, just a small amount there to balance. It's important to note that sometimes we have something that's a real small amendment. State law does not permit any fund or department to go over its budget without amendment, and so we want to make sure, even if it's $1, that we will be fiscally responsible in asking for amendment of that budget. In the enterprise funds, you can see each one of those there. Recycling, $15,000, and a later business item today, we'll talk about an interfund loan that is proposed, and the amendments between the water fund and the landfill fund that are addressed there. In our special revenue funds,
We have a number of items there. The RDA amendment is for some loan, a loan that was proposed that was not anticipated. And then there's a small one in the debt service fund. So those are all expanded upon in the Exhibit A to the ordinance that you'll be adopting. So that is what is proposed in that regard. Just to recount the budget that is proposed for 2019, the net again is $73,124,271. That is the revenue side, and it's balanced again with the expenditures and expenses. The amendments that I just discussed are also part of that budget adoption. But prior to that, it requires a public hearing, and so I would just turn that to you, Mayor, to direct that. Unless you have any questions ahead of time.
Any questions?
None.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will open the public hearing. Again, asking that you come to the podium and please tell us your name and where you're from, and you're welcome to come up to discuss these items that have been discussed either with Tyson or with Mr. Rasmussen. Mr. Cutler, I believe.
Right.
Thank you.
Nice job on balance.
Thanks.
One CPA to another. One of the things I'd like to say about Bountiful, and with due respect to the police and all, one of the reasons I stay in Bountiful is because the snowplows are so good. And I can always count on them. Whoever's responsible for that. Thanks.
Right there. We all pointed at the same time.
All right, thanks. Someone once said that if we ignore history, we're destined to relive it. And as I have as I have attended theater most of my life, and I've been in Bountiful for nearly 50 years, I've gone to Hale Theater, and for those of you who know anything about Hale Theater, it started in South Salt Lake, in a little bitty theater in the round that the Hales did. And South Salt Lake didn't support it very well, and so West Valley City said, oh, come and build your building. We'll build it for you. And we'll make you successful, which they did. But then they forgot about Hale Theater. And Sandy City looked at Hale Theater and they said, hey, we're growing. We're the biggest city in the west, the south side of Salt Lake Valley. And so what did they do? They stole the Hale Theater. And they built an enormous edifice. If any of you have been there, I mean, it is tremendous. We went to a graduation ceremony at the Maverick Center, actually 2 of them last week, and around the Hale Theater, the old Hale Theater, businesses are closing. Several have closed, others are struggling. Now, as I've observed South Davis and Davis County, we're pretty well landlocked. Is that right, Mayor? We don't have much room for growth.
That's true.
So, if I look at Layton, they're nearly twice the size that we are in population. So what if the mayor of Layton says, well, we want that theater? I submit that if Centerville and West Bountiful and all of these communities where the Centerpoint Theater is, put our head in the sand and ignore the fact that this brings prosperity to our area, and that people look to our area of Bountiful and Centerville and the other smaller cities. We have the potential of seeing a reincarnation of the Hale Theater. Now, I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime. I'm too old. But in yours, Kendall, she's old enough to be my daughter, maybe. But I think that we as a city ought to think seriously about cutting funds for the Hale Theater. And Kendall and I have had this discussion. I'm not an advocate of the government supporting everything we do. I don't believe we should. I don't believe you should. Quite frankly, I think you do too much now, but that's a whole different story. But I think the good that Centerpoint Theater does to our area is worth our support and worth us continuing to help. Let's not let history relive itself in Bountiful and Centerville. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cutler. Please, Jane.
I want to clarify a couple of things just to make sure everybody's understand. I'm a season ticket holder to Centerpoint, and I love it, and I go to it, and it's wonderful, and I am thrilled that we have this theater in our community. But I also want to point out that there's other organizations that do wonderful things. The Youth Corrections of Davis County has chosen, I guess I'm validating the $10,000 that you said you were approving for Joy Foundation. It's not just going to go to Chalk Festival. However, within the Chalk Festival, I could tell you stories that would bring tears to your eyes of children that are getting noticed, young people who feel good about themselves. And the Youth Corrections of Davis County has chosen Joy Foundation to help them with community service to kids who are getting in trouble, because they want the kids to go away feeling good about themselves, not hating the community for making them pick up debris and clean toilets. And we're taking these kids and we're having some miracles. I had a young man just 2 weeks ago who was arrested by the Bountiful police. And I told him, I said, you don't know how lucky you are. That's the greatest police department. And all he had was 5 hours of service. And our kid, you guys, we've got some kids that are in trouble. We've got drugs infiltrating our high schools. And we need these wonderful kids that Kendallin works with. They're here tonight to wrap their arms around the ones who are maybe not having such a good life. And I'm so grateful for all of you who have recognized and help us raise the youth of this whole county. And I love Centerpoint, and I don't think it'll go away. And I was on that committee running Get the Rap Tax. I was running around getting that. But I just want to say, hey, rah, sis, boom, bah for raising the taxes. We need to be selfless. And having a wonderful police department. And you guys, I'm not kidding. My little cul-de-sac is one of the steepest turns, 1150 North, up there above Cheese Park. Those plows, bless their little hearts. I don't even know how the plow gets up around that corner without sliding into my yard. But it's just wonderful. We have a wonderful community. They deserve us to give them a little bit more leeway to do better stuff. And I will go to bat for raising the taxes. I think it's critical that we do that and that we have these wonderful police officers who, they're not out to beat up kids. They want to help them. And I'm thankful for all of you guys. And rah-rah says football. Anyway, I just had to make a statement.
Thank you, Jane. Any other comments, please?
Thank you. My name's Trent Larson. I live up by Oak Hills Elementary. I appreciate the thought and that has gone into some of these arguments. I do have to say I support the idea of more balanced and more bountiful oriented arts because I see how much has been given in previous years. So thank you for putting that thought to us, and I realize that disappoints Centerpoint people, but I wanted to put that out there. I appreciate from the arguments this proposed tax raise obviously is going to be a difficult conversation, but I appreciate the arguments showing how this issue's been tracked for the last 5 years, and I appreciate seeing how the inflation has impacted what we have, and I got to say that it doesn't sway me much to see our comparison with other cities. I feel like if we can stay low, let's not follow everybody and just keep increasing the taxes, realizing that it is necessary sometimes. But thank you for the arguments and for the history behind those things.
Thanks for your comments, Trent. Anyone else? Okay, with that, we will close this public hearing, and we'll bring Mr. Galen back to the microphone.
Okay, Mayor and members of the council, we're to a point now with some council action items for you to consider. Recommending after these public hearings and the discussions that have taken place that you adopt Ordinance 2018-03 that encompasses the amendments that have been discussed to the current year budget we're in, fiscal year 18, the 2019 tentative budget that includes the tax increase amount in there, and user fees, long-term capital plan, and other things that are adopted part of that. And then, because of how the property tax rate increase process works in the state of Utah, it'll be necessary to hold a public hearing for truth in taxation. And we recommend, based on our the calendar for usual meetings for the city, that be set by you for August 14th at the city council meeting starting at 7 o'clock. So those would be the action items that we would be looking for your vote on, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Galen. Any questions further to Galen? If not, I would look for a motion.
Comment on the 14th of August. First of all, I apologize for the distraction of going in and out and refilling my water bottle and coughing at the same time. I thought I had a little bit of allergies going on, and now I'm pretty sure I have Ebola. So just wanted to apologize for the distraction. I'll be in Oregon at a family reunion on the 14th, and I'm certainly expendable as a single vote, but I would like to attend if there are other times that that might be scheduled that would be conducive to full attendance by the council. Could we look at that?
The dates are set by state law, so you're asking if we can make have that public hearing at a different date? Mm-hmm. Is that what I understand? Galen, where'd you go? I think we have to have it by the 14th of April. Yeah. At
August.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think everybody did, but it still doesn't make me feel better. Thanks. Yeah, 14th, we have to have it by that date, and I suppose we could hold it a week earlier at a not regularly scheduled council meeting. Just have an additional meeting if the council wants to do that. There's no problem with that. Correct, Galen?
Yeah, the intent behind all this is that the county needs to be informed that we are going to be holding a truth in taxation hearing. And so tomorrow I will send them an email to let them know that if you decide that direction. They will then combine our notice of that hearing with any others in the county that are going to be going for a tax increase. And then that will be the first public notice of this process. After that, we have to do one additional one. But the public hearings just need to be concluded, I believe it's by the week of the 14th. So it's probably you can go earlier, but
well, not knowing the rest of the council's schedule for the summer, and summers being as difficult as they are, maybe we should just leave it there.
I would propose that we look at putting it back to August 7th and moving is it possible to just reschedule our council meeting by notice? We'll just do the same thing, but on the 7th. Do we know if any of you looked at your schedule to see if that would be possible?
Because you can do that, but we will likely have a planning commission meeting scheduled the same night. I would love to see Richard attend both of those at the same time.
He's pretty sharp.
There's enough of me to go around.
With advance notice, we could cancel that meeting or reschedule that meeting as well.
Okay.
So it's just what you would like to do.
Maybe what we could do is even swap them if we could in that 1 month. I think it would be important to have the entire council here.
Yeah, I'd love to be there.
Would that be okay? Do we need a motion tonight for that? So we'll just look.
Actually, we do. By motion, you need to approve the date of the public hearing.
All right.
Yep.
So with that, if there's not any further discussion, I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that we change the date of the city council meeting to August 7th for the first city council meeting of that month.
And hold the public, the truth and taxation hearing.
Truth and taxation hearing.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you, Beth. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Not yet.
We did.
So we still have the tentative, the budget before us, if there's any discussion first.
There is a little, and I went without speaking earlier because I have a lot to say on this. So fasten up your seat belts there. Not really that much. First of all, I want to express my frustration with our legislators, our elected officials here in Bountiful, both in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, for stealing money out of Bountiful City's budget without giving Bountiful City any input on how that money will be spent. It's frustrating for us to try to plan a balanced budget and to have them come along and take the money from us without warning and without any recourse and allow us to go through a raising taxes process instead of themselves. That irritates me a lot, and it's not representative of the people that they're elected to represent, and it's not representative of our values here. That's frustrating. Secondly, Chief Ross, I want to say that I hate the idea of raising taxes. I really do. And what I hate more is the idea of police officers not having the backup that they need and the support that they need from us to be able to do their jobs and keep us safe. And I want to say that we've looked carefully at the budgets. This city does so much with what they have, and we understand that every dollar that's coming from the public is sacred and we are not wasting it. But this is one of those cases where we've got to bite the bullet and fund the things that need funded and help share the load around with everybody and make sure that our police officers go home at night. So, easy decision for me, well, not easy. Uncomfortable decision for me that we have to raise taxes to fill the void that our legislatures have left through their theft, and more comfortable for me to fund our police officers at the level they need to be funded. And after the other council members have a chance to speak, I'll be happy to make a motion.
Any other comments?
I want to echo that. That was very well said. And I know that the legislators often complain about unfunded mandates from the federal government, and then here they are doing the same thing. So it's frustrating that they're taking this money from our budget. But I do agree with Richard. I feel like, you look at extreme examples like Flint, Michigan, where they just let it go and let it go for so many years. I think when you don't take care of basic needs, then it is even more costly in the end. And so it's the last thing I want to do, but I think there are times when it's really wise.
Indeed. Thank you. Please, Beth.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to also add that that we have a lot of opportunities to deal with the legislature, and certainly during this past session it was incredibly difficult, and I wanted to thank Gary Hill for being, and Clint as well. They were both very much involved in making sure that some of the bills that you didn't see on that list stayed that way. And it has been an extraordinarily challenging legislative session this year as a result of some of these bills. And I did want to just echo what Councilman Higginson said and also Councilwoman Harris, because it is important, and we strive really hard to make sure that the city's needs are taken care of. So thank you.
Thanks, Beth. Anything else? I'll just make one comment before we actually take a motion, and that is I trust the process that we go through in this city. It's really amazing, and we have employees and we have supervisors of all the departments that we appreciate. And when we go through the budget process, it is a process, and it's a process that generally works. And I support the decisions that have been made. However, I'm really disappointed about no funding for Centerpoint Theater. I really do think that it's a treasure, and I think those who have spoken tonight know how much it is a treasure. And I wish that perhaps even though we proceed with this meeting and we go forward, that we may review in just our circumstance with the Centerpoint Theater and maybe able to do something. But I'm disappointed that we're not funding some. And I realize what we've done in the past and the reasons for all of that, but I'm disappointed because I do think it's a treasure. Thank you for all of you who spoke so well of it. Thanks. So we'll look for a motion for all of the other things.
Does this ordinance also include approval of the transfer from the Power Department?
It does.
Okay, thank you. I'd be happy to make a motion then that we adopt Bountiful City Ordinance 2018-03, amending the current year's budget as has been discussed and adopting the budget for 2019 as has been presented to us today.
I'll second that.
So just clarification, the tentative budget for 2019.
Correct, tentative budget.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And a second, we got two of those seconds. Was it a tie?
That's a third.
That's a third. So Beth as a second. Thank you. Any further discussion?
One item. I'm
Please.
sorry.
No, please.
I just want to say to Mr. Larson, we have no desire to climb that chart of lowest tax cities. We want to be at the bottom. So we're not looking at this as, well, hey, we can do this and we'll still be lower than so-and-so. That's not how we're looking at any of this. So please understand that that's not the method that's gone into deciding how we're going to raise our taxes.
Thanks, Richard. It still feels good to be near the bottom.
Indeed. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
One of
Absolutely.
the few ways to say that.
Yeah,
You're
I'd
positive.
say you said it very well. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, and those motions pass. Thank you. We will turn some more time over. Galen, you're going to be on your feet a long time tonight.
This is my last item, so you won't have to see me again for a little bit. Some time ago, on March 27th, we came before you with a request for an interfund loan between our landfill and water funds, and at that time we were asking for $3.8 million. The intent of that was to take care of some of the items planned in the city's replacement of the water infrastructure. And really, the major piece it was going to pay for was the Mueller Park water treatment plant that was under reconstruction, and that has still not changed. That is the case. So this staff report before you provides a few updates and corrections to that, and the reason it's being brought to you now is that the funding that was approved before was because of some delays in billing and things of that nature was not needed until now. So because we would want to be fiscally responsible, we are asking for, instead of $3.8 million, asking for $3 million for the same purpose. And the staff report has notations by each of the areas of the resolution that will adopt this that show you the differences. So we are saying that the disbursement date would be effective today instead of March. It's $3 million instead of 3.8, and that the Treasury rate is still the 10-year Treasury rate. That rate as of today is 2.96%, and so that is the rate that would be proposed for this amended interfund loan between the landfill fund and the water fund. And also noted that during the amendment process that we just discussed, that was part of that discussion, so that we would have that before you again as well, so you were aware that we were making a change in what the original resolution that was adopted back in March took care of. So before you tonight is Resolution 2018-08 that adopts the interfund loan now that would be taken a few months later for a lower amount and with a different interest rate. And that is amortization schedule for the payments, so that you can see what would be paid on that is on your desk. I didn't know that rate until today, so I couldn't put that in the packet. But I'd be glad to answer any questions, or I'm sure Paul Rowland would as well, or any of the others that are involved.
Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to make a motion that we adopt Resolution 2018-08, amending the interfund loan between the landfill and the water funds.
And a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion passes. Thank you, Galen. And we'll turn time now over to Chad.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, council members, this amendment before you is to change our code, our land use ordinance, to designate the Planning Commission as the appeal authority for variances in the RF zone. So just by way of background, and I'll try to keep this as brief as I can, state law requires that the city appoint an appeal authority or multiple appeal authorities to hear variances and appeals of decisions that have been made for our code. We have 3 in Bountiful right now. We have our administrative law judge. We'll be talking about him in just a moment, proposing to reappoint Glenn Bronson as our administrative law judge. The Planning Commission is one of the appeal authorities. They hear most of the variances in the city, and then the administrative committee has one small little sliver of appeal authority, and that is to hear variances to the standards of the RF zone. So that would be variances to disturbances of slopes greater than 30% and cuts and fills greater than 10% in the RF zone. A number of years ago, the administrative committee was given that responsibility, and based on reading the minutes, it looks like the idea was that it was to streamline that process. We had lots that had been created, many of which did not meet the standards of the code. It was recognized that there would need to be a variance to build on those lots, and this was seen as a way to streamline that process and to possibly make that a faster process for applicants, as many of those would be approved just to allow for building on those lots. That seems to have worked well for a little while. The change that's occurred is that as building has occurred in the RF zone, that's our residential foothill zone again, the lots have gotten more and more complicated. Those low-hanging fruit, the really easy lots to develop on, those lots that require just minor variances to build on, have become more and more rare. In addition to that, proposals for homes have become bigger and bigger in some cases, not always, but a lot of the homes are very large and require very big disturbances of slopes. The administrative committee is currently made up of 2 staff members. It's the city engineer or designee. The designee right now is the assistant city engineer, that's Lloyd Cheney. The planning director or designee, and I serve on that committee, and a citizen representative, which is now being filled by Councilor Holbrook. So that's the composition of the committee. And what we have found is that if an applicant comes to the counter and proposes some type of a development plan that Lloyd and I both feel is not consistent with that ordinance and with the variance criteria, it doesn't give that person good due process. Because if you can follow that process through, if there's 2 members of that 3-member committee that are telling a person at the counter, we can't support your variance, that's a denial. We know right before we even take them through the process that project is going to be denied. So we know that that's not good due process for an applicant. Now the code kind of recognizes that that might happen. It allows the planning director to bump items up to the planning commission, which we have done. We have bumped some of those variances up to the planning commission to give that applicant due process, to give them a neutral third party to review the application. that's happening with more and more frequency as we get more and more complicated lots. The other thing that's changed is that we've now moved into a phase of development where lots that were originally approved for a variance are coming back to ask for an additional variance to expand their home, to do an addition. That puts us in a very awkward position as an administrative committee because we've already made a decision that said that was the minimum necessary disturbance to allow for reasonable development, and now we're being asked to go even more. So now we are faced with that conundrum of, well, we already said it was the minimum needed for a reasonable development, now you'd like to have a little bit more development on that lot. So those two things, the increasing complexity, the desire to give applicants a due process. We need to allow people to have a due process, somewhere they can go to ask for relief from the code, have prompted us to propose to you this change to the code. Now, the change would make the Planning Commission that appeal authority for variances in the RF zone. They've been doing that a bit already in the last couple of years. One of the impacts that we've talked about is an additional workload on the Planning Commission. We don't think that's going to be a very big impact. These are fairly rare because we are now building out the RF zone. There's not as many lots that are available up there, and they're more complicated, more expensive to build on. The other thing is the timing. This was originally anticipated to create a more streamlined approach for applicants to get through the process. It's days, not weeks. As we've gone through changes to state law that require now different noticing, we're really talking about a difference of 5 or 6 days in the process. So it's not adding weeks to a process, it's just adding a little bit less than a week to a process. So with that, we are recommending that the City Council adopt this change to our zoning ordinance to appoint the Planning Commission as the appeal authority. The change to the ordinance will be very small. There's a table included in your staff report. We're essentially changing, the Administrative Committee will now say no on those decisions, and the Planning Commission will say the final review authority on those decisions. The Planning Commission reviewed this request last week and recommended approval of this to the City Council, and they forwarded that recommendation unanimously. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Chad, I have a question. Then after the Planning Commission reviews, then it's sent to the City Council for the final?
It's not.
No, it stops there.
Yeah, the planning, right now the Administrative Committee is the final authority. This would make the Planning Commission the final authority on those. They could appeal it to the administrative law judge, which we occasionally have, but not very often. So.
Thanks for your work on this.
Thank you.
Straightforward.
There are not any other comments? Then I'll look for a motion.
We do need to hold a public hearing.
Oh, that's right.
Yep.
Excuse me.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes. So with that, we will open a public meeting. And again, if you would come forward, speak at the podium, tell us who you are and where you live. With that, we will close the public hearing. And we will go back. Do you need anything to talk? Do you need to talk anymore? All right, then I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that we approve Ordinance 2018-04, amending the Bountiful City zoning ordinance to designate the Planning Commission as the appeal authority for variances in the RF zone related to disturbances of areas greater than 30% slope and cuts and fills exceeding 10 feet in height.
Happy to second that motion and acknowledge Chad's skill in only using 2 words to change our code. Yeah. Although those words are used multiple times. That's skill.
That's very good.
That's true.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, and that motion passes. And we're back to you, Clint.
All right. We are now going to consider appointing our administrative law judge. Included in your packet was a bio from Mr. Glenn Bronson. He has served as our administrative law judge since 2014. 2 years ago, we reappointed him as our administrative law judge, and we are here now to look to ask the council to reappoint him again. He receives the endorsement of the legal department, the planning department, and the engineering department. I will just tell you that he's competent, professional, courteous to our citizens and applicants. He typically renders decisions quickly. He's been great. I don't have anything but positive things to say about him. I'd be happy to answer anything more if you'd like.
I'm just curious how many times we've used him
So
in the past.
for 2018, the first time we used him was last week. So we're looking at 1 to 3 times a year.
Thanks.
And I will look for a motion.
I'd like to move that we approve Resolution 2018-09, appointing Glenn Bronson as the Bountiful City Administrative Law Judge.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much, Clint. And that is, and another Clint.
Yeah. This is just our annual ordinance adopting fireworks restrictions. State code allows for municipalities to take into account the uniqueness of each individual municipality and what the needs may be. We've consulted with our fire chief, who is here tonight, if you have any questions for him, and he has done the research and put a lot of thought into this and has determined that the safest, most appropriate restrictions would be to follow the same restrictions we had last year and the year before. And we've got a letter that he has written and provided as part of the packet, I'm sure you've read, and I think, and then we've also got a map that shows the restricted areas. For the benefit of the public, we do have a couple of people from the public here. The discharge of fireworks will be prohibited as follows. North of 1400 North Street, fireworks are prohibited east of 650 East Street. North of 400 North Street, fireworks are prohibited east of 900 East Street. South of 400 North Street, fireworks are prohibited east of Davis Boulevard. And fireworks are prohibited in any other areas designated by South Davis Metro Fire Agency officials. And we have maps available to the public if they needed to look at that at any time.
Thank you. Any questions to Clint? If not, we'll look for a motion.
What are the dates that fireworks can be shot off in the unrestricted areas?
What were they?
July 2nd through July 5th. So the legislators made a change this year to
Right.
reduce it.
So,
So it has been shortened.
July 2nd through July 5th.
I'm sorry.
July 2nd.
July 2nd through July 5th, and then July 22nd through the 25th.
So 2 days before, then the holiday, one day after. It used to be 3, then the holiday, and 3 after.
Yeah.
They cut it 2 days on the back end and 1 day on the front.
So that's state law.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Did they tighten the restrictions on time, Chief?
No.
Okay.
And did they change anything on the sale of fireworks time frames? Aren't they are they 2 or 3 days in advance of those dates, or?
The sales start.
2 weeks.
Is it 2 weeks?
I think so.
June 24th.
Okay,
So
thank
the
you.
sale starts, and then there was change in the restriction verbiage to give local authority greater restrictions, but we're not going to do anything. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other questions? Motion?
Oh, yeah. Move to adopt ordinance 2018-05, adopting the restrictions that Chief Bassett has presented to us.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you.
And that Clint presented to us. Sorry.
Thanks.
Both verbally and in writing.
Oh, good. The chief was gone, and I look up and the chief is here. So that's perfect. You had good timing because you have the last 2 items here.
Chief, while you were out there, did you check on my car?
I should have.
Just please,
I'll
next
promise you this, if someone takes it, I will find it and drive it back to you.
back. Thank you.
Okay. Mayor and council, appreciate the opportunity to be back in front of you to request approval to purchase 2 police vehicles. Funding for these vehicles is included in our fiscal year 2018 budget. The vehicles to be purchased are 2 2018 Dodge Chargers. We hope they'll be 2018. This is the end of the current model cycle, and they change that over sometime over the next week. So our hope is that we can still get 2018. There's a possibility they could be 2019, which would add potentially about $300 or $400 per vehicle, but our hope is we can still get them. The Chargers will be purchased from Performance Automotive Group at the Utah State contract price of $23,608 each for a total price of $47,216, which is within the amount we have in our budget. The following vehicles will be sold: a 2011 Dodge Charger with approximately 110,000 miles and a 2008 Dodge Charger with approximately 107,000 miles. I respectfully request your approval to purchase these two police vehicles.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Just one item, actually two. Chief, where are you currently selling your surplus vehicles?
So we're reviewing, we have been selling them ourselves on KSL, which there's some benefits to that and some negatives. The negatives, it takes more man hours to pull it off.
Sure.
We have received more funding for it. So we're looking at right now potentially using an auction company, TNT Auction. We're trying it out with two. If we can get more than we were getting for trade-ins, and even though it may not be quite as much as we're selling ourselves, it may be worth it. The manpower issues that we're talking about are significant, so we just have to find ways to work around it.
Secondly, thank you for that. Secondly, do we need to make a provision here so that if this pushes into the 2019 model year, the chief doesn't have to come back to us and ask for the additional funding? What should we do there? Bueller? Or I guess it's Beeler in the police office.
We do have a Beeler.
Yeah.
Bueller he might not be answering to.
I think it's as simple as approving this as presented with the ability for the city manager to make adjustments based on market prices.
Move to amend the motion thus.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And by the way, it's really nice to use our local people to get these vehicles. I think we
love doing that.
I think we learned, at the beginning of the process when Performance came that I think maybe they learned more than we did about the process, so that this came about. So, regardless, it's nice for us locally.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We always look to go that route.
Thanks, Chief.
Mayor, before we move on, could we clarify something real quick? I believe that Kentlin made the first motion, seconded by Chris Simonson, and then Richard made a new motion. So I believe we just have a first motion and we need a second.
I know, I asked Chris if he was going to second it, but then nobody did anything, so I was like, oh, maybe I was wrong, so, okay.
I second the first. I'll second the second.
Second.
And then just vote on it again.
Yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's voted on and
Sorry to
unanimous.
complicate things.
No, thanks. We thought we needed to do things 3 or 4 times tonight. We're kind of down to the end. Chief.
All right, Mayor, Council, one more request. Approve the purchase of 43 Motorola vehicle radios. Funding for this equipment has been approved in our fiscal year 2018 budget. Our current vehicle radios were purchased approximately 18 years ago in run-up for the Olympics. There was funding that was provided, grant funding for a lot of agencies. We benefited from that. Public Safety has been told by the Utah Communications Authority that we must have radios that are digital compliant by January 2019, due to all the analog radios being shut down, which would allow them to reduce the cost of supporting both analog and digital. We have spread the radio costs over 2 fiscal year budgets. This is the most significant, which is just under $100,000. Next year, or after July, we could be coming back for about another $20,000 in radios and then about $20,000 to $25,000 in the installation costs. But we'll cover that, I guess, as we go next year would be the appropriate way. But we've spread it over 2 years to reduce the financial impact in a single budget year. Motorola provided us with the Utah State bid contract price of $2,289 radios and $89 and change per radio, or approximately $98,452 for the 43 radios. This price does include a $1,724 credit for each of our old analog radios that without the credit would retail for $4,013 and change. All of our portable radios, I'm not wearing one, but the ones we have on our duty belts, we replaced about 4 years ago, and they're Motorola. So it is beneficial to have both our portables and our mobile radios the same company, the same brand. And it's benefited by the credit on top of that we receive. So I respectfully request your approval to purchase the 43 Motorola radios in the amount of $98,452.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous, and that is approved. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
We will look for a motion to adjourn to an RDA meeting.
Only if it's 7:30 already. Is it 7:30 already?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, and
We need that, you must see as well as I do.
I don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
Did we get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Didn't hear the motion.
You have an RDA agenda.
No, I accidentally deleted it. Sorry. One second. Let me see.
I hate to fold that.
Just give us 30 seconds to change recorders. Nikki's going to tell us when.
Okay. Could it be said that the most recent police vehicle purchase is a performance-enhancing purchase?
Yes, a performance.
Oh, wow. I thought
Very
those were
good.
illegal. Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Pretty clever.
No?
Check on that.
And what time does Panda Express close?
I don't know, but we better hurry.
Panda
Okay.
Express. What the heck?
Are we-
I'm afraid it's 9.